Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the panel coming today, and I very much appreciate your advice and expertise in terms of dealing with the 2018 Farm Bill. I represent a district in the Catskills and Mid-Hudson Valley in upstate New York, and I can tell you I've talked to dozens of dairy farmers, and not a single one of them thinks the margin protection program works. They're very cynical about it, and some are angry and some are just resigned. We've listened to a number of the discussions, depending on what commodity we're dealing with or whether it's dairy, about the need for exports and the need for trade. I'm a little concerned about the border adjustment issue, especially when I hear that the value of the dollar will rise, and it's somewhat speculative in terms of that rise, but what are the consequences, what are the unintended consequences of it? So I guess this is to Dr. Johansson as well as the other panelists, but particularly Dr. Brown. What can we be doing, because it seems to me we just go through this boom-bust cycle, what can we be doing to expand the domestic market for fluid milk and other dairy products? We're spending more now for this stuff, bottled water, than we are for milk. And I look at the USDA that says we can't sell a whole or a 2% milk or a flavored milk in a school lunch program, and yet the other parts of the government are saying, how do we come up with programs to shield people from the results of lower prices? And yet we don't seem to be spending enough time and effort to actually increase our consumption of what many of us would argue is a much more desirable product than some of the other things that we may be consuming as Americans and as school children. So perhaps we could address the question of what should we be looking at, what could we be doing to increase our domestic consumption of fluid milk and dairy products?
Consumer trends have, of course, always been very difficult to follow. We've gone through the boom and bust of consumers wanting more dairy fat, less dairy fat in the diets. I think when you look at the very recent data, however, we're starting to see some signs of some more positives occurring with some of the more whole milk products starting to show a little bit of growth in terms of demand that we haven't seen for a long time. There's a lot of work left to do in terms of product innovation. I see the industry spending a lot of time trying to figure out and answer that question with some of the new products that are on the marketplace today. But we have to continue to think about the packaging and delivery of fluid milk products to consumers, trying to find new experiences for them to consume milk products. That's I think, some of the few things that are available to us right away that might help stem what's been a long-term decline in fluid milk consumption.
No, I agree. I think we are seeing a projection for increased domestic milk consumption through the products that Dr. Brown had talked about, and I would expect some of those trends to continue. In addition, marketers are finding ways to get milk into the grocery store and find margin there for producers, such as through organic programs and organic production. But again, with the forecast that at least that we have, and I think it's a little bit more optimistic than the FAPRI forecast in terms of production going forward over the baseline period, trade will be essential for making sure that we are able to move those products overseas and maintain margin for our dairy producers.
Right, and I realize that Dr. Johansson might not be able to comment on this, but one thing that you just mentioned, when you mentioned organic, I have an organic yogurt producer in my district. They're paying $38 a hundredweight for milk, and it's certainly, I think we'll see more and more producers looking in that direction. But Dr. Brown and perhaps the others, what about this whole business of school lunches and 2% and whole milk? I mean, does this make any sense whatsoever?
I think we're going to have to continue to evaluate what we see in the school lunch side to make certain that we put in front of students what's nutritionally sound. I think we do go through ebb and flow in terms of what we think is quote, if you will, good. And I think we have gone through a period of time where maybe we were avoiding some of the higher fat products that are out there, to now maybe realize that in correct quantities, we can talk about a different makeup of school lunch than we've had in the past. So perhaps that's more debate that we need to have as we move forward.
Gentleman's time has expired. Mr. Lucas, 5 minutes.